This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Tina Cornely is the founder of the nonprofit organization Bridging Humanity, an organization dedicated to breaking the cycle of poverty through holistic solutions. In particular, Tina focuses her work on her recently published 9 Steps to Eradicate Poverty, which provides practical solutions for agriculture, self-medical care, energy production, water purification, repurposing of trash, family planning, hygiene, and environmental protection. Prior to founding Bridging Humanity, Tina was the Director of Technology of the Solomon Guggenheim Museum and former Operations Director of the Miami Art Museum. I spoke with Tina in Miami. Hi there, Tina. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Where am I calling you today?
I am in Miami, Florida.
Well, it's February in Miami, so I hope that means sunshine and good surf.
Actually, no. It's been very cold, which is unusual for Miami at this time of the year.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm a little further south of you in Costa Rica, and I'm happy to say that it's actually been a little chilly here, but it's still summertime, as it is always. You have started an organization called Bridging Humanity.
Correct.
And I'd like to start our conversation by just having you tell us about Bridging Humanity and what the focus is of that organization.
Okay. Bridging Humanity is a 501c3, but it's volunteer-based, which means that we do not pay salaries and we volunteer our time. And the purpose is to eradicate poverty, and in particular with an emphasis on children and orphans and disadvantaged kids here in the U.S. and abroad.
Why volunteer?
Well, I feel that as a nonprofit, the money should go towards the projects or buying equipment for people so that they can go to the next level. And I really wanted to give back. So this is my way of giving back, by not charging, by volunteering my time, sharing my knowledge, and so that all the money can go towards the project.
So tell us about that knowledge. Take us through this story. I know that you haven't spent all of your time in the nonprofit sector, and this is a relatively new venture for you. Can you tell us about, where did you get your start? What have you been doing for the last 20 years, and why did this become an important imperative for you?
Well, I started out my career in technology back in the early 80s when the first computer came out, the 88, and I actually started teaching at the University of Miami, and so I taught all of the very beginning classes from, how to program in DOS and all the different programming languages, and then how to use Windows, and then how to use WordPerfect and WordStar, and then all of the other programs that followed afterwards, and then on to networking, and then just built my way up. And so my career started off in technology, and then I have always been passionate about the arts, and I went on to be the Director of Technology at the Guggenheim Museum in New York, and I was there for 6 years, and I helped structure the museum, since it's a global museum, so that it could allow its sister museums across the globe to tap into their servers and use them via the cloud. And that was back in the time, it was in the 90s, and nobody really knew what the cloud was at that time. So it was groundbreaking work that I was doing. And then after 9/11, I decided it was time to come back home to Miami. And so I wrapped up my projects, finished rolling everything out, and then came back home and started working at the Miami Art Museum as their operations director. And so my knowledge is in technology. I'm a tinkerer at nature, and then with an emphasis on, museum administration and art. And so I had been donating my vacations, working and training at orphanages across the globe. And some local philanthropists suggested that I start my own nonprofit. And it was because of my mentors telling me that this is what I needed to do. I decided to take the plunge. And when I was actually helping a distressed orphanage in Mali when they had their coup d'etat, I realized that I was on the right track. This was indeed what I wanted to do. And so on my way back, on the flight back, I came up with the name. And when I landed, I found out that it had not been registered, so I took the name and I designed the website and got everything set up for Bridging Humanity, and that was back in June of 2012.
You said that the focus is the eradication of poverty. Tie that to the volunteering of your vacation time into working in orphanages. How did you strike on poverty rather than a more niche, like, let's say, education or health or prenatal care or something like that?
Well, actually, it does tie in, because in order to help people get out of poverty, it starts with education. And so one of the things that I try to do is I try to take things that look on the surface to be difficult, but they're not. And so let me give you an example. This was prior to starting the nonprofit. I spent some time at an orphanage in Guatemala, and I taught the kids there as young as 6 all the way up to 13 how to make network cable, which is very easy. And so once you show a child that how easy it is to make network cable and that you use that to have access to the internet, it opens their mind. And it empowers them. And then the next thing I would do is when I would go back the following years, I would take it up a notch. I'd show them how to make, for instance, fiber optic cable. And then the next year I would show them how to make HVAC cable. And so basically what you do is you make it simple and then you scale it up each time so that they then can become electrical engineers. So the other thing that I have been doing is teaching technology, but making it so that it's user-friendly and simplistic. It's showing people how to repurpose trash, which they have available to them, and it's a free commodity, and then turning it into something useful that they can sell to make money or even use for themselves. And so basically I've come up with a system. I call it my 9 Steps to Eradicate Poverty, which basically encompasses what you need to have a healthy life. And it starts with clean water, healthy, nutritious food, alternative medicine, how to do your family planning with cycle bead necklaces, how to make a compost toilet, how to harness solar energy, how to make a non-electrical refrigerator, how to, as I said, repurpose trash into art and sell it, and so forth. So that's kind of the platform that I use, is to teach, what I can, share my knowledge, and with whatever they have available.
How long did it take for you to come up with the 9 Steps to Eradicate Poverty? I was reading on your blog earlier in prep for this interview, there was something of a celebration that this had come together after many years of work. And take me through that process. Was that just sort of collecting the stories and the techniques you've used over the years, or was there some other process you used?
As I said, I'm a tinkerer by nature, and I like to take things apart and figure out how things work. And so I did have some knowledge going in, but what happened is I'm also a forensic analyst, so I did some extensive research to try to understand what is the root of poverty. And in doing so, I realized number one is you have to have clean water. You can live on little food, but you can't live without clean water. And so I put things in numerical order, and I started figuring how can a poor person without much have access to clean water? How do they purify it? How do they make a filter? And so forth. So I started doing research to figure out how, and this was after I started nonprofit, I started researching what is poverty, what are the biggest killers out there in the world, or the biggest roadblocks for poor people, and then I started coming up with easy solutions with what you have available. That took about, I'd say, 2 years to pull together. And I created my 9 steps. And then actually a friend of mine who is the founder of the Golden Institute, they do a lot of work, nonprofit work, taking care of child soldiers and reacclimating them into society. She was the one that urged me to write the book, because I basically just had an article that talked about it briefly. And then she said, no, you need to have a book that when you travel, you can hand it to people. We need to translate it into different languages. And so that's where I got the impetus to create the little booklet. And I've been pushing it out through social media, and I've been sharing it with nonprofits so that they can have access to it, and so that they can in turn share it with the poor people that they work with. And so that's how the book got started. The book probably took me a day to pull together. And it's very simplistic. It's not really a real book. It's basically a little pamphlet. But I do call it 9 Steps, the book.
But it's something that you could hand to, as you say, a poor person, and they would be able to read it and take action with it?
I do have some illustrations. It's not that simplistic, but I do have some videos. And actually, I'm going to take a step back. I want to explain something that I've done to you that will facilitate helping a poor person be able to assimilate and understand a language. For instance, the book is in English, so how would a poor person understand that? So what I did is I took advantage of a free plugin, and I took my 9 steps and I translated it into a mobile application. So it's simplistic, and then what I can do is I take with me my Android, and I use my Android for everything. I use it to take my videos for my documentaries. I use it to show instructional videos to the poor people. And so what I decided to do is I created this mobile platform for 9 steps, which is very simple, and it explains to the person, and I'm going to have it in different languages. Like I have a trip coming up to Nicaragua, so I'm going to have it in Spanish. And so basically I can show it to them in the moment, and I have a solar charger with me, so if I'm out in the jungle, it'll work. So I can show them, and under each one of the descriptions, I have a video. So it's so I have taken it a step further, and so it's mobile now, and I'm going to launch it on my next trip.
And what's been the feedback thus far from not only your beneficiaries, but are you then presenting this to funders, to foundations, to philanthropists?
Actually, I haven't presented this latest venture of mine to funders. I always keep my funders apprised of what I'm doing, but this is something that's really fresh and it's new, and I'm just going to launch it. So when I'm done with my trip, I'm going to double back and share it with my contacts. And I can send a link, and they can actually look at the mobile version on their mobile phones so they understand what I'm talking about, and they can see in the moment how it works and how simple it is. So this is sort of premature at the moment. We're just launching it. I haven't gotten any feedback. And so in terms of, my funders love what I'm doing. I'm a very small operation. I have 2 major funders that are art collectors that are very wealthy and have their own museums that I actually met while I was working in the museum community. So I have a very small base. My friends support me with what I do. And so as far as mainstream and other big organizations out there, I'm starting to gain some momentum because I'm one of the writers for Social Good, which is a part of USAID. And so little by little, I've been gaining some interest in what I'm doing. And hopefully it'll keep growing so that I can spread these life-saving tips.
Let's talk about your organization for a second. Then you started, as so many people do, sort of volunteering your time, finding a topic that you're passionate about, involving yourself, and now you've come up with your own innovation with your 9 Steps book. Is your ultimate goal with Bridging Humanity to sort of create a larger organization that has staff and is sort of competing for funds out there, or what's that evolution look like to you?
It's interesting. I really do not foresee Bridging Humanity becoming a major nonprofit. I prefer to keep it small. I prefer to partner with other big operations and big organizations so that they can help me disseminate this information. I'd like to keep things simple. I'd like to continue getting out in the field myself. If I grow too big, I'll have to deal with salaries. I'll have to deal with other headaches that I'm not prepared to deal with at this moment. And I do believe that by partnering with other nonprofits, I can, make a difference. So at the moment, I don't feel the impetus to grow the, Bridging Humanity. I do welcome volunteers if they want to help me out. So that's pretty much my game plan for the moment is as I said, I want to eradicate poverty on a global level, and I believe it's possible, and that's what I'm trying to do.
My next question is sort of story-based. Tell us about either an opportunity you had using your 9 Steps book or one of the projects you did in the past where, is there a moment where you saw, hey, this really changed lives for either a family or a community in an unexpected way, or sort of a surprising event that you didn't expect to happen?
Yes, actually, I discovered that there is a simple way that you can treat a poor woman for preeclampsia. Preeclampsia is one of the number 1 killers of pregnant women, and 800 women die every day. And so to me, that was just devastating, and I wanted to do something to address that. And so unfortunately, there are a lot of women all over the world that live in remote areas that don't have access to a clinic or a hospital, and midwives have to travel to them to help them. And so I've come up with some barefoot midwife toolkits and also things that they can do to help prevent a woman from getting preeclampsia with a proper pregnancy diet, and also how to test to see if the woman does have preeclampsia, how to test their blood pressure, and you can actually there's a beaded bracelet that you can use to count, and it's a system where you can tell whether the person has hypotension or hypertension and what to do if they do, and these are things that you can do in a low-tech scenario. And let me give you an example. What you do is you take the mother's urine first thing in the morning without her having had coffee or anything. And you put it in a glass jar, and then you take some scalding hot water, and then you place the glass jar into the scalding hot water. And after a minute or two, if it turns cloudy, that means there's protein in the urine, and that means she has preeclampsia, because you're not supposed to have protein in your urine. So that's a simple solution for a barefoot midwife to be able to know if she needs to get this lady to the clinic because she has preeclampsia. So that was one of the big breakthroughs that I made that I was really proud of, because it was just me trying to come up with a system that could be used that hadn't been discovered before, and a system that works. And then the other thing I came up with is soaking in Epsom salts. That was another breakthrough, because the treatment for preeclampsia is using Epsom salts, but intravenous and in a hospital setting, because you have to be hooked up to monitors. And so that's not feasible in a low-tech, village. So what I did is I came up with and I've actually tested this to see if soaking a pregnant woman's feet in Epsom salts will help bring her blood pressure down, and it does. And that's one of the things I'm going to be working on this upcoming trip to Nicaragua, is now I have an oximeter that attaches to a smartphone, which is the same oximeter from LG Technologies, which to me is going to be a godsend for a lot of these barefoot midwives that have cell phones that can actually use it to test to see what the oxygen levels are in their patients. So that's going to be able to help corroborate my findings.
With these breakthroughs, do you have the impetus to take them to a larger institution like a UNICEF or a UNDP, and sort of just say, hey, look, I've got something great. How can you use it? Have you had those opportunities yet?
Well, the interesting thing is that some of my midwiferys that I've partnered with have shared, like they're doctors, I'm not a doctor, they've shared some of my life-saving tips, and they're now being included in manuals that are being distributed, so I'm really happy to hear that, like the part about boiling the urine. But what I have been doing is applying for challenges. Like there's a saving lives at birth challenge that I'm actually in the process of applying for that includes these tips. So hopefully it will get some recognition, and I will be able to partner with UNICEF and the UNFPA with the United Nations to see how we can get this spread as quickly as possible and into the right hands. So that's in the works, and hopefully it'll happen.
One of the things that strikes me, I mean, you really embody what we talk about on Aidpreneur a lot. You're somebody who made the leap, you had a career, you decided to transition into what you're doing now today at Bridging Humanity. I'm always fascinated with the potential of overwhelm. You go to Africa, you said you were in Mali, you go to Nicaragua in the near future, and you're able to help 1, 2, 3, 10, 15, 20 families with the solutions that you're doing. Do you ever have those moments where you step back and you're like, oh, I'm just one person and not enough's getting done?
Actually, no. I've come up with a system that works really well for me that I can spread this information, and I'll give you an example. In Latin America, they have what they call casa maternas, which is a maternal house, and it's where the pregnant teens and women go to give birth, and they can go and stay there for a couple, at least in Nicaragua. I don't know that this service is available in some of the other countries, but I do know that they do have casa maternas. But in Nicaragua, you can stay there up to 3 months, and there's usually a hospital right next to them, and then they go and they give birth in the hospital. So for me, I go to Nicaragua, and I go to San Carlos, which is right on the border between Costa Rica, and I have about 75 to 100 pregnant girls right there. It's a captive audience, and I just go in there and I teach them about the family planning with the cycle bead necklaces. And the interesting thing is, I'll explain to you how it works so you understand the system. Girls are fertile between 8 and 19 days after their period starts. And that is if their period is regular. Sometimes if the girls are malnourished, they'll have erratic periods and the system won't work for them. But it's basically a necklace that's a calendar that they know when their period starts, and they can either use a ribbon or a clip or something, and they can count down the days, and so that they know that between 8 and 19 days, that's when they're fertile, and that's when they need to be careful. You can do the same thing with a calendar. So what I do is I go in and I teach them how to use the system, and I even retrofitted a rosary, and I showed them a regular cycle bead necklace, and I showed them the retrofitted rosary. Which necklace would you guys like? And they said, we want the rosary. And I wasn't surprised, because I grew up in Honduras and I know they're very religious. And so I gave them all the rosaries. And so one of the ladies, and actually most of the girls said, how come nobody ever taught us this? And I said, well, I grew up in Honduras and I understand it's a taboo subject, but we're going to change that. I said, you're going to tell your younger sisters, your best friends, you're going to share this information so that women know and they can manage their family planning.
That was my next question. It says, it seems so simple. I mean, this is family planning 101. What your synopsis is, it's a cultural divide. It's a taboo subject in most of these places.
Yes, it is. And what interesting thing is that the necklaces vary from country to country. For instance, I was in the jungles of Borneo helping the World Wildlife Fund with some of their outreach training, and I was training the Yukit Dayak tribe, and they loved the necklace. They said that they did not like to have the injections because it made them ill, so they welcomed it. But when I went to stay at another tribe deeper in the jungle, they said that their husbands would not accept or allow the fact that they could not have intercourse between the 8 and 19 days. So it was like one tribe was okay, and the other tribe was, we got to find out another system because this isn't going to work for us. And you'll find that it'll vary from village to village and country to country.
The question I want to ask is, how do you structure your time as someone who's just started an organization, I guess, almost 3 years ago now? You've got multiple projects. You want to grow a little bit, but not too much. How much of your time is sort of spent between making sure you have enough funding? How much time is implementing your projects? How much time is just sort of administering your life?
I would say that it's like a 50-50. 50% of my time is doing my projects, and then 50% of my time is administering and managing my day-to-day.
Is there any particular system or software or, from a technologist perspective that you use that you think is unique that others might benefit from?
Well, I would go back to the smartphone. For me, this is a godsend because I'm able to access the internet in the middle of nowhere. I'm able to access my emails. I'm able to access my bank account. I'm able to send out my letters to my funders. I'm able to create my videos and upload them. And like I said, I've actually created 2 apps now. One is because I like to take high technology and bring it down for non-smartphones. What I did is I wrote an application for an SMS phone that also teaches girls how to know when they're fertile, but basically they have to call a number, and then they basically will get a series of prompts, and they're asked to put in when their period started, and then they'll get an answer back letting them know that whatever that day that they called, they're fertile or they're not. So I would have to say that technology is my saving grace, and being able to use high tech to simplify my life, and then low tech to help the poor.
I love these simple applications you're coming up with. I think that SMS application is fantastic. I heard you mention earlier when you were at the Guggenheim and then after you moved back to Miami, you had spoken with your mentors, and they helped you to make the decision and make the leap. Take me through that process. Here at Aidpreneur, I'm fascinated with that moment of, okay, I'm ready to do this. Was there a foundation you needed to have in place? Was it just a mental click for you? Did you have to put a nest egg together? What was sort of the recipe for success in order to make that leap and be comfortable with it?
Okay, well, what happened was I was actually dedicating a lot of my time to doing more humanitarian projects, and this one funder of mine and close friend, her name is Rosa de la Cruz, and she has her own museum here in Miami in the Design District, wanted me to go help a distressed orphanage in Mali. And so she gave me some money, and she said, use this to help the orphanage get off the grid. Because one of the things you want to do when you want to help someone is help them become self-sufficient. So I went there with that mandate. I wasn't a nonprofit at the time, but I knew that I was passionate about humanitarian work. And actually, when I was there, they actually had the coup d'etat. And so it was a dangerous time, but I was able to accomplish a lot. I was able to help them out and to get ahead. And it was extremely difficult in that, lack of amenities, extreme duress, hard work. And when I was on the plane, I realized that this is what I want to do. And so and Rosa had been encouraging me all along, because when she handed me the cash, she said, look, I think you really need to start your own nonprofit. I said, because I trust you and I love you. And I know that you're going to use this for what you're saying you're going to do. And I said, but I have friends that could help you, but unless you give them a tax receipt, they're not going to be that inclined. And so I realized with what she told me that she was right. As much as, I could only go so far with my friends and with the people that had money that could support what I was doing. I realized then that I needed to create a 501c3 so that I could give people a tax receipt and try to be able to make bigger headway and faster. So that was basically the moment. That was my moment that I realized that I needed to. It was a combination of the trip to Mali, Rosa's words resonating in my mind, and then it was on the flight back, the long flight back, that I realized she's right, and I'm ready to do this. And so when I got back home, that's exactly what I did.
Fantastic. Tell me about a time, either in the last 3 years or maybe as you've put together this before you made the leap along the way, about a time that you failed, either through trying to discover one of these breakthrough technologies or putting together the 9 steps. Tell me about a time that you stumbled or a project didn't work out the way you wanted to, and how you recovered from that.
Well, I spent a month at my dining room table in my home trying to find a way that I could provide lights for the poor, and it looked like a mad scientist table. It was a struggle because I was so determined that I was going to figure out a way that I could teach a poor person how to make a battery that could light an LED light, because when I was in Mali, I saw kids studying under the street lights at night. Little kids sitting around a light post doing their homework, and it broke my heart. So I said, I have to figure out a way to create a battery that's long-lasting that will light an LED, and that's possible today. So I spent a month. It was, and I even have a video that I did. I think it's called Let There Be Light. And I just kept racking my brains, and I kept thinking to myself, I have to be able to do this. This is simple. We have the technology today. We should be able to show people how to make a very simple battery. And so it it required a lot of research, a lot of trial and error. And you're going to laugh. I even I tested everything, because I said, Thomas Edison, he tested and failed thousands of times before he got it right. And I said to myself, I can do the same thing. And so I tested pickles. I tested papayas.
I was just going to say, are you going to do the potato battery?
Yeah, exactly. No, that I actually did something better. I did it scientifically. I figured out there's a lot of potassium in papaya. There's a lot of magnesium. And so it's just, I went down and I was dissecting every material I was using to the scientific level so that I could figure out the equation so that it would work. And so the long and the short is that my fingernails were dirty. They were full of charcoal from all the tests I was doing. I was literally a mad scientist, and it took me about a month. And then what I did is I created low oxygen reduction charcoal, and I used hardwoods like oak, bamboo, coconut shells. And what I did is I found out that you can actually make a battery that's very strong, made out of charcoal, active charcoal, and you can use lye. And lye is basically rainwater mixed with ashes that have not been contaminated with kerosene or anything like that. And so I made a battery out of charcoal that actually lit an LED light. And you can actually connect them in series and they'll work. And so I thought, this is great, but I realized not every poor person is going to have an LED light or a bulb. And I thought to myself, they could find some in the landfill, when you're going out and you're repurposing trash. But to me, it wasn't something that I felt was the best solution. And so, but what it did do is it made me aware of, for instance, graphene. I learned how to make graphene, and I learned how to make a battery that I can show a poor person how to do so that they can in turn gain a livelihood from it by making homemade batteries. So I wasn't able to, I didn't feel, I made it work, but it wasn't up to par for me for what I wanted. And I realized that there are some products out there that they're not that expensive that would probably serve the purpose better. So it was one of the situations where I'm a perfectionist and I wasn't entirely happy with the light that I was able to get. It made me realize that not everybody has access to an LED light bulb. But the good thing is that I can show someone how to make their own graphene, how to make their own graphene battery, and with basic materials. So it was like a breakthrough, and I was a little bit disappointed, but at the end of the day, it was a learning lesson.
That's a great story. Tell me something of the antithesis of what we would call your typical poster child development worker. And I'm thinking of, someone in the United Nations or someone working for a large NGO or a government donor body. What, from your perspective, do the next 10 years or 20 years of development in aid look like? Do you see business as usual? Do you see particular trends in how things are changing? What would you predict for how we deliver aid and development in the future?
It's changing rapidly. For instance, look at Ebola. When Ebola hit, USAID and I think it was the Gates Foundation and some other NGOs said, we live in very interesting times. We have a lot of entrepreneurs out there that, and the interesting thing is that the attributes of an entrepreneur is that they are tinkerers, they think on their feet, they make things better, and they have big giving hearts. A lot of the most successful entrepreneurs today, the billionaires, never finished college, and they went on to make successful businesses, and they also have successful nonprofits. So what's happening is USAID is realizing that, and what they're doing is they're putting a call to entrepreneurs. And they did that for Ebola, and they said, we have all the brightest minds, all the entrepreneurs out there that are eager to help. We want your help. Help us figure out an easy suit. It's not time consuming to put on. It's easy to get off, and you won't contaminate yourself when you're taking it off. And they had all kinds of different scenarios where they said, this is where we need help. And they put a call out to all entrepreneurs to join them and help them figure out how do we address this. Because they realized that today, with the fact that everyone's connected, with the fact that we have so many entrepreneurs that are eager to help, let's take advantage of it. And so I see in the future more of that happening. And so what I see happening is USAID and all these other big nonprofits are going to create challenges where they put it out there for all the entrepreneurs to collaborate. And in a way, we're creating global citizens that figure out solutions to address these problems from people that are excellent problem solvers and have big hearts.
I love that answer. Thanks. Two more questions for you. One is, you've concentrated on low-tech solutions. You've concentrated on being able to deliver solutions to people in some of the most dire situations. In your mind, where does the tipping point happen from someone that you're able to sort of give that sustainability to be able to say, okay, hey, look, I'm leaving the poverty line behind and I'm going into the next phase or the next, level of income? Do your systems get them there, or are you just more of a Kickstarter, or how does that work to get them to that true, middle income level?
I'll share an interesting story with you that basically explains just that. When I was in Borneo and I was at the Ukit village, I was teaching the women how to repurpose trash to turn it into jewelry and other type of useful items that they could sell to make money. And one of the things I did is I usually bring the tools with me and I donate it because a lot of these tribal communities they call them like community halls where everybody goes and they share the tools. So it's like a community tool chest. So I donated all these tools to them so that they could share it. And one of the things I showed them how to do is how to take plastic bags and turn them into plarn. And yes, you have plastic bag waste problems even in the jungles of Borneo. So I showed them how to repurpose it, turn it into plarn, and then how to make a crochet needle so they could crochet it. And you can make a crochet needle out of rattan or palm or fronds or a twig. And so I showed them how to crochet. Now, I gave them the basics, and I also showed them a couple of things. I like to give people the tools and allow them to experiment and flourish and grow with it. And so, because tribal people in general, they have a specific art. They have it's like almost innate sometimes, the types of art that they make and the designs that they use. And so I don't want to try to use Western influence. I like to let them have their own influence. And so I was showing them all these different things, and then I let them go off on their own and make their own. And so on the last day, I decided I was there training them for 2 weeks, and I said, look, we're going to have a contest. And I said, we're going to have the most creative, the most repurposed, the most colorful, I came up with every criteria for each lady. So I made sure that I have a gift for each one of them because they're very competitive. At least they feel like they earned it. But I wanted to make sure everyone got something. And I said, we're going to have like a little potluck party. And as luck would have it, the heads of World Wildlife Fund Borneo went and did a surprise visit with some VIP people. And so it was actually when we were having this party, and all of the women had all of the things that they had made. And it was a very emotional moment for me, because I was very proud that these women went beyond my expectation. And at the timing of it couldn't have been more perfect, because the World Wildlife Fund got to see, because when I told them I was going to show these women how to repurpose trash, they thought I was nuts. But they did it because one of the funders that sent me is one of their biggest donors. So anyway, when they saw what we were doing, they embraced me and they said, "We understand it now." And the women made slippers crocheted out of plarn, and they decorated them with straws that they had actually carved. And the work they did was exquisite. And so with the little bit that I gave them, the little hand, the little overview, they ran with it. And so to me, it was empowering, because I saw that if you take the time and you show people, they get it. And then also, to be vindicated and have the people that allowed me to visit and spend time with them got to see the end result, and they were beyond happy. So that was a win-win situation for me.
The last question I have for you, Tina, is one that I ask every guest here on the Terms of Reference podcast. And that's simply, you've been able to make the leap into your own organization. This volunteer work is where you started, and now you've sort of created your own sustainable enterprise. If you were a student coming out of university or a master's degree now, or you were somebody transitioning from another career like you did, what's your one piece of critical advice that you'd give to them about how to create both sustainability and satisfaction in aid and development work?
Well, what I would say is the most important is you have to be passionate about what you're doing. If you're passionate about, and you have to figure out what is that thing that makes you passionate. For instance, is it kids? Is it women, empowering women? Is it the environment? Is it animal conservancy? There are so many different gamuts out there. You have to figure out what is it that you are passionate about, and then just pursue it. And I think if more, and also following your dream, I think if more people followed their dream and they were passionate about what they were doing, it wouldn't feel like work, and the world would be a happier place. So that would be my advice, is to, number one, follow your dream, and number two, find your passion. Find what gives you great joy. Is it protecting the environment? Is it protecting animals? Is it protecting kids? And for me, it's all of them, because we're all, as far as I'm concerned, we're all connected. We're all important. If we want to have a future, we got to take care of all of our resources.
Tina, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from Aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.